Greetings from St. Augustine, Florida, my hometown. St. Augustine is located in the southern United States along the northeast coastline of Florida. It's known as the nation's oldest city. It is the oldest continually occupied city in the United States. For the most part, it's a tourist town. It's also known as a college town. With its many tourist attractions, it's also known in the paranormal world as a very haunted town. St. Augustine has a lot to offer. I was born and raised here in St. Augustine, and I've seen a lot of the good side of it and quite a bit of the bad. This story, unfortunately, is about some of the darker side of the town that's not very well known to most people. It was during the Christmas season of 1996 when the entire downtown was lit up with little white lights. The Nights of Lights were in full effect, including the boats anchored in the bay. The town was crowded with tourists and locals all taking in the holiday atmosphere. Nothing would suggest that a serial killer who had eluded capture for nearly a decade was about to be exposed. The residents of this little town didn't expect one of their own, a man who had grown up here, he would be revealed as the killer. It was then revealed that William Darrell Lindsey, also known as Crazy Bill or Redbird, was in fact the serial killer from right here. William Darrell Lindsey was born on March 18, 1935. When Lindsey was just 5 months old, his biological parents were killed in a car accident. He was then adopted by the Lindsey family and was the youngest of 4 children in the adopted family. Over the years, he would have his run-in with different problems, and over the years he was married twice, divorced from his first wife, and his second wife died from cancer. Lindsey began his known murder spree in 1988 at the age of 53 and continued until his arrest in 1996. All the victims were female between the ages of 20 and 50 years old. The victims were usually known as prostitutes who had addictions to numerous drugs. Nearly all of Lindsey's victims were raped and then beaten to death. The women were either Caucasian or African American. Some of the victims were put in the water, and a couple were posed and left in a place they would be found. In 1996, Lindsey was arrested for the murder of Lucy Raymer in North Carolina. After his arrest, Lindsey confessed to 6 other murders. In July of 1999, Lindsey agreed to a plea bargain to avoid the death penalty. He was then sentenced to 30 years in prison at the Marion Correctional Institute in Florida. As far as his victims that he confessed to killing, they are as follows. And a note to mention here, most of these victims and where they were found were within a mile or two from my current location where I live and went to school and hung out as a kid. The first victim was Lisa Fowley, who was murdered October 9th, 1983. She vanished after a long night of drinking at the Tradewinds Lounge. 5 days after she disappeared, Lisa's body was discovered in a marshy area off the west end of Pope Road in St. Augustine Beach. It would be January of 1997 before St. Johns County detectives learned that Lindsey was the killer. And then it went from there. The second victim was Anita McQuaig Stevens, who got into Lindsey's car at the corner of Riberia and King Street in downtown St. Augustine, somewhere around 7 p.m. on November 29, 1988. A county worker discovered her mutilated body floating in a borrow pit near St. Augustine Beach the following morning. She had been beaten so badly that her eye socket was crushed and her jaw was fractured in 2 places. Her nude body had cigarette burns and bite marks in several spots. The third victim was Connie Terrell, who was picked up by Lindsey as she walked along West King Street about 8:30 p.m. Sunday night, June 10, 1989. Her nude body was discovered by a fisherman barely 12 hours later as it lay half submerged in a borrow pond off Holmes Boulevard. She had been strangled with a rope and then shot in the head once with a .22 caliber. In the same April 1997 statement that Lindsey made admitting McQuaig's murder, he gave police a detailed account of Connie's killing. The fourth victim was LaShawna Streeter. She was at what was known at the time as Crackhead Corner, looking for a date on the afternoon of March 1st, 1992. When Lindsey pulled into the parking lot about 4:15 p.m., when she left with him, it would be the last time she would have been seen alive. Within an hour, she was beaten and kicked to death for allegedly trying to rob Lindsey. Her body was found 10 days later by a local man as he was taking a shortcut from 207 to Old Moultrie Road across what locals called Quinney's Land, lying just off a dirt road on Old Dairy Farm Road. She had been partially undressed and hidden under some broken branches and other debris. Victim number 5 was Cheryl Lewis, who flagged Lindsey down around 2 a.m. at the corner of Palmer and King Street on a rainy summer night, June of 1995. They had gone less than a block before she grabbed some money from the dash and bailed out of the vehicle. She ran down the railroad tracks towards Crackhead Corner, but Lindsey was able to catch up with her and crushed her skull with a pry bar. Her body was found several days later by boaters at the Moultrie Creek boat ramp. For victims 6 and 7, Lindsey pled guilty to the murders of Denitha Sneed and Diana Richardson. Even though their bodies have never been found, Denitha went missing in April of 1993 after spending the day with Lindsey at his trailer on Masters Farm. On the drive back to King Street, she revealed that she was HIV positive. In his handwritten statement, he said, "I started planning to kill her. When we got to the end of the paved road, I just stopped the truck and started beating her. I hit her with my fist about 6 or 7 times and she went out, completely unconscious. I went to the woods about 30 feet along the bank and threw her in the creek." Diana disappeared in October of 1995 when she agreed to Lindsey's offer for money for sex. Lindsey later stated that he had taken her to the same borrow pit where he had killed Connie Terrell. During sex, Diana somehow angered Lindsey and he hit her in the back of the head hard enough to knock her unconscious with a single blow. Dragging her from the car, he dumped her body in the borrow pit where it floated out a short distance and then sank. The last known victim he confessed to was Lucy Arnett Raymer. Lucy was murdered in December of 1996 in Asheville, North Carolina, where Lindsey had been living. Her body was found dumped near a duck pond. This was the one that got him arrested and led to the information about all the others. These are just a few of the victims that he admitted to killing. It is said that he may have killed up to 20 or more women altogether in Florida, North Carolina, and Virginia. Once his arrest and trial became news, reports began to surface all over Northeast Florida of encounters, close calls other women had experienced with Lindsey. Some were prostitutes, some were female convicts, some were just party girls. But violence and unpredictable brutality and murder had become routine to Lindsey. Yet, ironically, it was his mediocrity that kept him invisible for so long. In July of 1999, William Darrell Lindsey plea bargained his way out of a death sentence and was given 30 years. He was due to be released on December 11th of 2025 at the age of 90. Instead, he died in prison, April 17th, 2001. At 71 years old, his words to detective handling his case still ring chillingly true. He said, quote, "You've got to understand, there's a good Bill and a bad Bill. Good Bill is a decent person. Bad Bill is a person society needs to be afraid of."